All right, the Indiana Fever continued to make moves to fill out this roster. They had a huge announcement on a re-signing today, and we also have other moves that are being made around the WNBA. The Indiana Fever appears to be re-signing Damiris Dantas. Here it says, courtesy of the Clark Report and Underdog WNBA, Damiris Dantas is expected to re-sign with the Indiana Fever.
The Indiana Fever just made a move that might look minor on the surface, but it carries a much louder message underneath. The kind that makes you pause. Because the closer you look, the more it feels like Caitlin Clark isn't the centerpiece. She's being worked around. And the deeper you dig, the more unsettling it becomes. Are these just routine roster tweaks? Or is Indiana quietly putting obstacles in front of its own superstar before the season even tips off?
Damiris Dantas doesn't deserve this. She doesn't deserve it. Timing is everything, Indiana Fever. Amber Cox, Kelly Krauskopf. Timing is everything. When we're seeing Angel Reese get sent to Atlanta, when we're seeing Chicago Sky go out and trade for Rickea Jackson, the Sparks getting Ariel Atkins, when we see the Minnesota Lynx bringing in Aneka Ogwumike for a visit, we see the New York Liberty flirting, giving the googly eyes to Alana Smith. Indiana Fever fans want something juicy.
Something about this feels off, and not just slightly off like a shirt worn inside out and brushed off as nothing, but completely upside down like building a race car and forgetting the engine. Because the one thing everyone expected from the Indiana Fever after drafting Caitlin Clark was simple. Build around her like she's the centerpiece of a championship puzzle. Not treat her like an optional add-on to a roster that still feels incomplete.
Damiris Dantas does have experience at the backup five. She knows how to play with Caitlin Clark. She can shoot that three and stretch the floor. I'm not super stoked with the signing, but I get it. And these are the type of signings you are going to have. The Indiana Fever are going to be signing a bunch of minimum deals. They got to fill out a roster. They like between Caitlin, Kelsey, Aaliyah, and y'all want them to bring Lexi and Sophie back too. There ain't no money for nobody else except for one more player that needs to be a starting power forward. So everything else is going to be these low budget minimum deals like a Damiris Dantas.
And yet here we are, watching decisions unfold that make fans pause, look twice, and ask a seriously uncomfortable question. Are the Fever actually committed to maximizing Caitlin Clark? Or are they just piecing together a roster and hoping she somehow makes it all work on her own?
Damiris Dantas is to sign with the Indiana Fever. And now this is the first confirmed signing that we have for the Indiana Fever. It's pretty clear that Aaliyah Boston and Caitlin Clark will be back. It's pretty clear that the Indiana Fever are still going after Kelsey Mitchell. Will she be back? We are not sure. But Damiris Dantas is set to sign with the Indiana Fever. One thing I will also point out, you guys, is fans noticed that the 2026 team roster on the Indiana Fever's website, it originally only had Caitlin Clark, Aaliyah Boston, Michaela Timpson, and Kelsey Mitchell. No, excuse me. Kelsey Mitchell was not there.
Because when news started circulating about the expected re-signing of Damiris Dantas, the reaction wasn't excitement or even cautious optimism. It felt more like collective confusion mixed with reluctant acceptance. Not full-blown outrage, but definitely not confidence either.
Got Caitlin Clark, biggest star in the league. She's brought so much to the league, and she's caused the league to make so many changes. One of these changes is that everybody's getting a new facility, including the Fever. As the Clark and the Fever prepare for the 2026 season, the team shared a major update on X regarding their long-term plans. We're unveiling a first look inside our Sports Performance Center, the WNBA's largest and most advanced training facility, coming spring of 2027. Clark.
Now, to be fair, this is where things get complicated and honestly a little ironic. On the surface, the move makes sense in the most technical, spreadsheet-friendly way possible. Dantas brings familiarity. She knows the system. She has experience with the team. She can space the floor to a degree. And maybe most importantly, she likely comes at a minimum contract. And that last part is doing a lot of heavy lifting here because the Fever are quietly operating in a financial corner they created themselves. If you're one of the people who insisted the team had to keep Kelsey Mitchell and retain key rotational pieces like Lexi Hull, then you're also part of the reality that led to this kind of move. And that's where the tension really starts to build. Because while you can explain the decision, that doesn't automatically mean you should defend it. There's a difference between understanding a move and believing it's the right one, and right now the Indiana Fever are stuck in that gap. Yes, Dantas provides familiarity. Yes, she knows how to play alongside Caitlin Clark. Yes, she can stretch the floor in certain situations. But the real question isn't whether she fits, it's whether she actually moves the needle.
However, now she is there. And again, I do not know the timeline between this, but I saw multiple fans pointing out, like, Kelsey Mitchell used to not be on the website for the Indiana Fever, but now she is on that website with Caitlin Clark, Michaela Timpson, Aaliyah Boston, 3 players who we know will be returning. Damaris Dantas has not been put on the roster, but Kelsey Mitchell is there. There are only 4 players right now that are listed for the Indiana Fever.
For a lot of people watching closely, the answer is a quiet but firm no. The bigger issue isn't even this one signing, because one minimum contract player doesn't define a season. The real concern is what this move represents when you zoom out and look at the pattern forming. It starts to feel like the Fever are leaning into comfort instead of ambition, choosing familiarity over upside, known quantities over potential growth, safe decisions over bold ones. And that approach might keep a team competitive, but it's a strange strategy for a franchise that just landed one of the most transformative players in women's basketball. A player who demands a roster that can keep up with her, both physically and mentally. That's where the criticism starts to sharpen. Dantas, despite her experience, comes with limitations that are hard to ignore. Mobility has been a consistent concern, especially in a league that's getting faster and more dynamic every season. And when you're building around someone like Clark, every piece matters. Especially the bench pieces, because they're the ones who either sustain momentum or quietly drain it. So when fans look at this move, they're not just seeing a depth signing, they're seeing a missed opportunity.
Something we can sink our teeth into. And unfortunately, we didn't get it. And unfortunately, Damaris Dantas, collateral damage to the timing of this signing. The Indiana Fever signed Damaris Dantas. People aren't happy about it. Oh my gosh, the Indiana Fever were running it back. Shoot! Amber Cox, what are you doing, Amber?
They start thinking about younger, more athletic options. Players who could have been brought in at a similar price point. Players who might not have the same familiarity but bring energy, versatility, and the kind of upside that actually matches where this team should be headed. And that's where the frustration really kicks in. Because this isn't happening in isolation. Around the league, other teams are making aggressive moves, clearing cap space, reshaping rosters, and positioning themselves for real contention. Meanwhile, there's a growing fear that the Fever might just run it back with too much of last year's group, as if continuity alone will fix problems that were already painfully obvious. And continuity is valuable when you're already close. But when you're still searching for an identity, it can quickly turn into stagnation. Re-signing familiar faces, stacking the roster with players who already struggled to find consistency together, it doesn't inspire confidence. It feels like hitting replay on a season that already exposed its flaws. And this is where the Caitlin Clark factor makes everything more urgent. Because her presence doesn't just raise expectations, it accelerates the entire timeline.
There's big time free agency news that just hit the damn internet. Now this is crazy because I was just on live earlier today, chopping it up with Ben Daniel in the chat, and we let it be known, bro. They have 24 to 72 hours to potentially save or sink the season. Well, I'm here to tell you, they working, and I got to give them a round of applause. Now, there was a list that we shared on live earlier today. Now, on this set list was names of several players that people feel that will come in and make immediate impact. Now,
this isn't a slow rebuild anymore. This isn't a wait-and-see situation. When you have a player who can command attention, elevate everyone around her, and completely reshape your offense, you don't take your time building around her. You move with intention, urgency, and most importantly, clarity. And right now, clarity is exactly what seems to be missing. The roster still has a glaring need for a true starting power forward. Someone who can stretch the floor, defend multiple positions, and create real space for Caitlin Clark and Aaliyah Boston to operate. That short pick-and-roll duo has the potential to be devastating, but only if the pieces around them actually make sense. Without that, everything gets harder. Spacing tightens. Driving lanes disappear. Defensive pressure ramps up. And suddenly, your generational talent is working twice as hard for half the results. That's not just inefficient, it's unsustainable. Because this isn't really just about one signing. It's about what that signing represents. And right now, it feels like settling. It feels like a team that hasn't fully committed to building something special around Caitlin Clark. And that's where words like boycott start creeping into conversations. Not as a literal call to action, but as a reflection of how disconnected the fan base is starting to feel from the team's direction. Because expectations have changed.
Like I stated in the previous video, we lost Chloe Bibby, but the main thing is, who are the Fever keeping? All right. I don't want them to keep Howard. So yeah, I don't know. Natasha Howard, I don't want to see her on this roster. All right. I'm glad we kept KK. But it's as far as who we get, you know, we're talking about Ray Burrell, we're talking about Azurá Stevens. I don't know. I just hope we get individuals, players that want to play with the Fever.
This is no longer a team that can quietly sit in the middle of the standings. This is a franchise under a national spotlight, carrying increased pressure, and anchored by a player who has already proven she can handle a massive stage. And with that comes responsibility to make smart decisions, to take calculated risks, and to give your star the tools she actually needs to succeed. Right now, it doesn't feel like that responsibility is being fully embraced. There's still time, of course. The offseason isn't over, and one or two meaningful moves could completely change the narrative. Because the goal isn't just to be better than last season. It's to become a team that can genuinely compete with the best in the league on a consistent basis. And that's where the real question starts to linger, just loud enough to make people uncomfortable. Are the Indiana Fever building a roster that unlocks Caitlin Clark's full potential, or one that expects her to carry the weight of its limitations? Those are two very different directions. And right now, it's not entirely clear which path they've chosen. And that uncertainty has a way of shifting expectations over time. Slowly, subtly, but dangerously. Because instead of asking how far this team can go, people start asking how much Caitlin Clark will have to cover up.
What else people could really expect, man? Like Kelsey Mitchell's going to eat up a lot of the money. We want a good starting power forward. We need to find a good starting power forward, man. We need one, and we need one bad. We need one bad. Not a max level player, but we need a quality starting power forward, preferably a stretch four that can shoot the three and provide spacing for Caitlin Clark and Aaliyah Boston in that short pick and roll.
That isn't a championship question. That's a survival question. Because when a roster isn't properly optimized, the burden doesn't disappear. It just shifts, and it almost always lands on the most talented player. In this case, that means more pressure on Caitlin Clark to manufacture offense out of broken spacing, more responsibility to stretch defenses that aren't being punished for collapsing, and more moments where she's expected to turn difficult possessions into highlight plays just to keep the team afloat. And while she's absolutely capable of doing that in bursts, building an entire system on "she'll figure it out" isn't strategy. It's wishful thinking dressed up as confidence. The irony is that the blueprint is already there. You can see it in real time. Defenses collapsing without consequence, possessions tightening under pressure, and the same player looking unstoppable one night and visibly frustrated the next. Not because her talent changed, but because the environment around her did. That's why these smaller decisions start to feel bigger than they should. A depth signing isn't supposed to trigger this level of debate, but when it's viewed as part of a broader pattern, it becomes something else entirely. It becomes a signal, whether intentional or not, about how aggressively a team is actually trying to improve.
Amber Cox, get this one single-handed player. Well, I would say a couple players, but this one right here is crucial and very, very important, because this would single-handedly get the Fever over the hump. Over the hump being that we will potentially automatically become a WNBA contender out the gate. There's nothing they can say, do, or anything that could ruin that. Let me pull up something for you guys, because this go hand in hand with what I'm about to show you guys in this free agency. Free agents that came out that we went over on live. Now on this list right here is names of players. Impactful players.
There's still this lingering sense that Indiana is trying to balance two timelines without fully committing to either. On one hand, there's the desire to develop, to grow organically, to keep familiar pieces that bring stability and comfort. On the other hand, there's a player who accelerates everything she touches, who makes patience start to look like hesitation. Those two approaches rarely coexist for long without friction. At some point, a decision has to be made about what this team actually wants to be. If the goal is to compete at a serious level, then the roster has to reflect that urgency. That means prioritizing athleticism, versatility, and players who can thrive in a faster, more dynamic system. It also means being willing to step beyond comfort, because comfort is often what keeps teams stuck in the middle. And that's where the tone around this situation shifts. Not into anger or outrage, but into something more consistent and harder to ignore. Impatience. Fans are watching other teams take swings, watching rosters evolve, watching contenders take shape in real time, and then looking at Indiana and seeing something that feels restrained. Maybe even overly cautious. And caution has its place. But it's rarely what defines teams that break through. Especially in a league that's getting deeper, faster, and more strategically advanced every season. In that environment, standing still, even slightly, can start to feel like falling behind.